fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction, he's got everything outside of both of them. Maloney!
Oh, he's taken Anderson. Anderson's up top.
Oh my God! Big crash. Oh my goodness, half the field's going to get rolled.
Second very close. These guys are want to make their way through the field very quickly.
Oh, there we go. Oh no!
That's massive! This is it! This is over! I can't believe this! Oh my God!
God, what?
This is the original esport racing game. This is iRacing.
By SimSpeed TV, you are joining us for 38 laps in the iRacing V8 Supercars official series here for round number 4 at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in beautiful Montreal, Canada. And always a pleasure to come to this circuit, and especially seeing as this is a circuit that is not visited by the Australian iRacing V8 Supercars normally, but thanks to the iRacing service, we are here in Canada with these 650 horsepower V8 machines, and it's always good racing around this circuit. And I think the word of the evening may be slowdown, but we will see how tonight's proceedings unfold. Joining me in the commentary booth this evening is David Haynes, and giving us these wonderful pictures this evening is always Jay Kennedy behind the buttons of the booth this evening. But David, very complicated track here, especially in a V8 supercar, but crucially, the slowdowns, particularly at the final chicane, corner 1, and a couple of other places around here are going to be the real things to watch out for this evening.
Yeah, no doubt. I think this is a track that really plays to the strength of these cars. A lot of really tough braking zones, a lot of really long braking zones from speed. And of course, that's always challenging in cars like these. And exactly, you're right. A lot of these corners, if you get in too hot and you cut them, you will be served an automatic slowdown penalty. And if you're in a tight pack, that 1 or 2 seconds that you might lose from that could cost you a handful of positions. If you can do it in an F1 car, you can do it in a V8 supercar, no doubt.
And these V8 supercars are especially good at launching themselves over the massive curbs here at Montreal, so it'll be good to see a couple of cars getting up on 2 wheels. We might see occasionally when the guys are really getting into the nitty-gritty of it. We're just riding on board now on the tail of Michael Taljancic, who's coming round for lap number 2, currently sitting in 10th position at the moment on a 36.0. So he comes towards the line, taking the wide arc out to the line, and it will be a 36.2 for Michael. So not able to improve. Top 10 position at the moment, though not too bad for him. Looking very nice and tight up the front of the field. Brett Loxton currently leading the way, just marginally ahead of Jake Burton, 19 thousandths of a second, separating position 1 and 2 at the moment, with Chris Coxhead and Jackson Suslin-Harlow tucked in very closely behind. Now, interestingly, positions 4 and 5 there at the moment. Jackson Suslin-Harlow and Brady Myers, those guys are very close to each other in the championship. Were previously teammates at TTL, but of course, during the week, there's been a bit of a spill, and TTL are no longer a presence in the especially Australian iRacing community, which is a really big shock to a lot of people. So it'll be interesting to see how those two guys fight it out now that there's not so much to do with team orders up in the air.
Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one for sure. I mean, the points obviously stay with the drivers. They're still battling for their own little championship here. But, some of them might feel a little bit rudderless if they were relying on the team for their focus, for their practice, maybe for their setups as well. It's clearly not affected the speed of the drivers because they're still up there. But, yeah, expect them to look a little different, and maybe the dynamic between the drivers will change.
Yeah, it will be very interesting to see. Track temperature at the moment, ladies and gentlemen, hovering around the 29-degree mark, going up a little bit, going down a little bit. It's currently 3 o'clock in the afternoon server time here, so could go either way with track temperature. Obviously, quite a lot of cloud cover at the moment. You can see the circuit looking very dark at the moment. We might see the sun peek through a little bit later in this race. It is going to be fairly substantial, as we said. 38 laps here at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, and roughly 1.5 minutes per lap. That is going to give us a very lengthy race indeed, very close to, if not slightly over the hour mark. But Brett Loxton for Zuva Racing, I think that may be his first pole position in a Monday night Strength of Field broadcast race. So congratulations to Brett for pole position this evening. Jake Burton very closely behind on row number 1. Position 2 for him, 19 thousandths of a second separating those two. Chris Coxhead had a massive night in the AOSC here at Montreal on Friday. Start to finish win, and obviously still keeping good pace in that car. Will be good to see how he goes from 3rd. Jackson Suslin-Harlow out of 4th next to him. Brady Myers in 5th positions from row number 3 alongside Jack Boyd for Gone Rogue Motorsport. Marlon McMullen will start from 7th alongside Kyle Stokes for Evolution Racing Team. Harley Haber, a good name we have not seen in this series for a little while, returning with Mark 1 Esports out of 9th position, and Michael Taliancic will round out the top 10 for Pursuit Sim Racing.
Deeper into our 23 car field, 11th place is occupied by Sean Thompson, and alongside him for One Performance Racing is going to be Dean O'Brien. Behind them, Brian Borg and Corey Preston. And on row 8 is Damian Johnston and Guy Leach. Behind them is Steve Jansen and David Kinman. Mikhail Letchov on row 10 alongside Zach Baker. And rounding up the back of the field, last but certainly not least, we've got Bruce Keeley, Christian Smart and Scott O'Keefe.
And the revs are rising now. 23 V8 supercars, 650 horsepower apiece. And they are go here at Montreal. Good start from Brett Loxton, our pole position man, as he comes up into turn number 1, has a clean run as the cars now start to compress into this very tight and narrow section. Most of the cars doing a really good job to be respectful, giving each other a good amount of room. Jake Burton's going to go for an early look and going to go for the race lead early on. It's going to be a bit of a tight squeeze there, and oh my gosh, that is Chris Coxhead, who has had a massive accident. That is going to choke the field immensely. And we'll have to get, oh my God, we've got a car on its roof. We'll have to get and that's Jackson Suslin-Harlow. So not a good start in the initial drive for a new privateer. And unfortunately there, looks like Jackson was very deep with Chris there. Both of those guys running very hard into turn number 3. And we'll just see, so goes to shove it down the inside there. And I have to say, unfortunately for Jackson, looks like he just carried a little bit too much speed there on cold tires, and that has ruined a lot of races, including Chris Coxhead, who was really looking for a solid result here. So an unfortunate start there. Had 2 rough starts in the last 2 rounds of this series, but thankfully most of our 23 car grid has gotten through the thick of it, as we see Brady Myers having to give up a position there to, I think that might have been
Dean O'Brien for One Performance Racing got through there. They were side by side at the exit of the hairpin, and O'Brien clearly with the better run. There might have been a slowdown trying to be served there as well.
Yeah, I think he did have a slowdown. Good spot there, David, as Harley Haber now gets a poor run out of the final corner, and he actually, I think, might have gotten a slowdown as well, pulling to the inside there and letting Steve Jansen through. That's Brady Myers running a little deep into turn number 1, trying to chase back down the JSMR car of Corey Preston, who's had a ripper start. Started 14th and is up into 6th position already. Not something I'm sure Corey Preston is complaining about at the moment, but at the front of the field, it is looking fairly tight as couple of cars now making their way through. So everyone's kind of sorted themselves out single file now. And looks like we've lost about 3 or 4 cars due to that accident at the beginning. We'll see the effects of that very shortly once the cars have made a couple more runs around here. But this has really helped Brett Loxton and Jake Burton, but they're really pushing each other right now. And Jake Burton might even go for a move down into the hairpin. He's going to force Loxton wide. Is there going to be a little bit of a touch on the exit? Forcing the issue is Jake Burton. He wants to get to the lead of this race very quickly. Obviously got good pace in that car, but Brett Loxton, well, he's only won one of the official series races here for the Monday night. I'm sure he's going to want to have another one under his belt. Jake Burton, though, is absolutely pushing himself through into the front of this race, and there's going to be a touch, and Jake Burton might just meet the wall. He does not. Saves it, spins it back round. He's going to have to be careful not to get the way of Dean O'Brien as they all squirrel through the final chicane there with an extra third apex of Jake Burton there for some people. So very, very hot at the beginning of this race. Normally we see these guys cool it down until the first pit stops, but it's all holds bar tonight. Brett Loxton's got to slow down into turn number 1 amongst all of that as well. So we just have a look there, and I mean, it's always difficult to get 2 cars through the final chicane here. And unfortunately for those guys, it didn't work. But Brett Loxton now sitting in second position, and Marlon McMullen, the man who started 7th, is in the lead of this race.
Dodged the lap 1 carnage and then dodged the lap 2 carnage. Loxton got to the inside by putting 2 wheels on the grass, really aggressively trying to force his way through, and in the end neither of them wanted to yield, so one went around, one had to shortcut across the chicane, and both of them have lost out to that. Marlon McMullen, as you point out, into the lead from 7th.
And Marlon McMullen is a man who is no stranger to this car. Several championship titles under his belt, and not a man who you want to have at the front of a field charging away without too much concern, because he's going to have some pace in that car. Having a look now at Harley Haber, who's coming under a little bit of pressure now from the 22 car of Bruce Keeley there, and Bruce makes that move done very nicely there. There's Christian Smart, who's got a lot of damage to that car, might have even just checked up car there, and now Corey Preston's trying to go the long way round on Michael Taliantich, or in fact, a bit of a bump and rub there. I think that's actually Taliantich going for the move, and he might even get pushed a little bit here by Steve Jansen, but I think Taliantich has got a slowdown, and Steve Jansen was trying to bump draft a man with a slowdown. That's very unfortunate, and well, we said slowdown was going to be the key word of the night. We've already said it a few times. We're only 4 laps in here, and we've had so much going on these first few couple of laps, ladies and gentlemen. It's continued on for Kyle Stokes in the ERT machine. He was battling with Zach Baker and unfortunately skipped through the chicane there, and he might have, well, maybe he's blown up the engine here. We're just going to have a look on board and see. He's got very poor straight line speed there, which could indicate an unhealthy engine there. And I think he might have gotten a slowdown there, and that he's definitely lacking. He was lacking pace in that car, and has pulled off to the side of the road for whatever reason. Very unfortunate for Kyle Stokes and Evolution Racing Team. Now Jake Burton carving his way back through the field. Dean O'Brien is his first or second target on that list, and he's made that work very quickly, and now will try to pursue Brett Loxton, who's about 3.5 seconds up the road. And now Brady Myers is having a bit of a look on the One Performance Racing car himself, has a little bit of a look, but decides to tuck back in and go for a move somewhere else. But he'll definitely be wanting to get past that One Performance Racing car and try and follow Jake Burton up to this leading pack here.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, Burton's clearly got massive pace in that car, and if you can just ride along behind him, that might be a chance to bring you up to the likes of McMullen and Loxton.
Yeah, and it's going to take them a little while. Those guys have a fairly substantial lead now, but Brett Loxton has not lost any pace after that small mistake, and he is caught right back up on the back of Marlon McMullen as he locks up into turn number 5 there. Very easy to lock up around this Montreal circuit, especially in the V8 Supercar. A lot of trail braking involved in a lot of these corners and those harsh braking zones as well. It's really easy to just apply a little bit too much compression, that brake pedal, on the initial application and ride all the worries into the corner. But these guys are doing a fairly good job out front at the moment. Just having a look now, and Dean O'Brien has lost that position to Brady Myers. So Brady will try and tuck into the slipstream of Jake Burton and propel himself up towards that group of McMullen and Loxton, as we said. And McMullen and Loxton could get into a battle here, as we just see now Brian Borg going for a move on the 22 car of Bruce Keeley once again. So Bruce, just losing a couple of positions these last laps as Brian moves himself up in his machine. But up at the front here, having a look now at the battle, and wow, it's pretty evident that Jake Burton is already starting to claw in on these guys fairly substantially. He's got that gap down to 3 seconds now, and I'm sure that if he can keep plummeting away these laps, he'll be up to them in no time. But his strategy is going to start working itself out probably in the next 14 or so laps. And I imagine at the pace that he's got going now, he may just catch the leaders before we get to that pit stop window.
Yeah, of course, definitely expecting a pit stop in a race of this length. And with the V8 supercars, it's always the tyre life that really leads the strategy more than the fuel numbers like you might expect out of a GT car. Pitting it halfway almost seems like the default in a one-stop race in these cars, unless the drivers choose to mix it up, going a little bit longer or trying to get a more aggressive undercut.
Yeah, we have seen the undercut work quite effectively, and some guys especially really do like jumping on the fresh new tyres as soon as they are available and they can get that fuel number to the end of the race. So we see now David Kinman going for, that's Sean Kelly going for a move, Sean Thompson, pardon me, even, going for a move on David Kinman there, and David making that very easy for Sean down into the hairpin, and that will promote Sean up into 13th position. He started from 11th, so got caught up a little bit in the opening laps and starting to make his way back through the field. But this battle up the front looks like Marlin's managing to hold station at the moment. Brett Loxton last time around ever so marginally faster, and Jake Burton about, 4 thousandths of a second faster than Brett Loxton and Marlon McMullen that time round. So Jake's going to have to pick up the pace just a little bit if he wants to catch up to these guys. But Brady Myers behind him, not making as much of an inroads, is actually losing a bit of time to all the guys up ahead of him. So a little bit of work needed for the new privateer. And he has a couple of cars just behind him who are starting to fall away ever so gently. Dean O'Brien in that one performance racing car already up 7 positions for him. So a great start nonetheless. And I'm sure that he'll be happy to keep plodding away and keep himself in a top 5 position there. He does have a couple of fast cars coming up behind him though. Wouldn't be surprised to see Corey Preston starting to pick up a bit of speed. He can get himself past Steve Jansen. Those guys are locked fairly closely in a battle just behind these guys as well.
Lost a position there through the hairpin. He's just gone too deep on the brakes, and Jack Boyd has gone through. So the pressure there getting to Dean O'Brien, just as you were mentioning that he is, around some rather fast cars and some behind him.
Yeah, so he's starting to fall behind now, but we'll have to see if he's able to keep that pace up. He's got a couple of seconds to the cars behind him, so he can hopefully just put himself into a heads down position and focus and get himself some nice clean laps in. Up at the front of the field though, it is still a bit of a stalemate between these two guys of Marlon McMullen and Brett Loxton. Two very experienced drivers in these V8 supercars, although Brett probably deserves to have one of these official series titles under his name, but has yet to do so. Definitely putting in a good effort now to try and change that as he chases down the several time series champion here at Montreal. We've so far lost 4 of our 23. We actually only had 22 cars start the race. We had a 23rd entry who didn't ever make the track. So cars that are out of this race, unfortunately so far, Chris Coxhead and Jackson Suslin Harlow after that very unfortunate incident at the beginning of the race. Christian Smart got tangled up in all that as well, and Kyle Stokes had some damage to his car, which has seen him pull off to the side of the road and want to take no further part in this race. So 18 cars still circulating at the moment. You can see Brett Loxton is making very gentle inroads here into Marlon McMullen, but just not quite close enough to maximize a move here.
Yeah, 3/10 quicker on the previous lap, obviously closed up on this lap as well. So pace looking good for Loxton, but Burton, I think, behind is slowly easing the gap down. Was 3.8 seconds, was 3.6 seconds, now 3.1-ish seconds. It varies a little bit to bit here, but he's slowly taking a couple tenths per lap out of it. He might not get to these guys before the pit stop cycle starts, but he'll definitely be within range that if he decided to try and undercut these guys, it might be possible if he can spring 1 or 2 laps on them, especially because for the top guys, passing hasn't looked particularly easy around here, and that's when you think about trying to make your moves through the strategy.
Yeah, well, we did see a very small gap in the times between the top 4 guys in the qualifying. Now, of course, Marlon was well outside the top 4. He was in 7th position there. So he's actually keeping up a considerably good pace relative to his qualifying performance. Now, this will be interesting here. Bit of traffic for our leaders, and it is going to be Christian Smart staying right out of the way. Oh, not right out of the way. He still wanted to keep the gas in it, and Brett Loxton having to move aside just a little bit there for him. Now, Brett's got a bit of a run here. He may go for the move down into the final corner, but he got bitten when he's already had a bit of an incident in there, and he's obviously applying a lot of good pressure to Marlon McMullen because Marlon's been locking up those brakes quite substantially, and heating up those tires is not going to be helping. But I feel like Brett is probably, I think that if he didn't have another car in front of him, he'd be going a lot faster, and he's just only making marginal gains into Marlon at the moment, just simply because the fact that he's there. I think he probably could be stretching out this gap to Jake behind, but because Marlon's just not going particularly quickly, it does seem like Brett's getting held up here. So he really needs to just focus his efforts into saving his tires and making sure he has the car in the right place at the right time to get past Marlon here, so he can really start building a gap out to Jake, because Jake is starting to come now. And the guys up ahead last time were significantly slower just because they're that much closer to each other at the moment. And Jake in the last couple of laps has brought that gap down by about 6 or 7 tenths of a second, which is starting to get up there pretty quickly. And you can see already another 2 tenths of a second on this lap alone.
Yeah, indeed, and it just looks like a lot more consistency out of the lap times from Jake Burton. His last lap was only 1/10 off his best lap, whereas McMullen was going on 6 or 7 tenths off his best lap, and the same for Brett Loxton. I mean, they haven't, they've sort of used the best of their tyres maybe, and now it's dropping away a little bit quicker than it is for Jake Burton. Burton's just holding on to the pace better.
It does seem that way, and it'll be interesting to see if Jake has any favours for Brett once he gets up there as well. Hopefully not, but you never know when you haven't had the benefit of a replay in these racing situations. You never know what feelings might be expressed when you get door to door. So I'm sure that we will see that happen in the near future, because as we were just saying, that pace from Jake has been incredibly consistent once again. Last time by, just within 1/10 of his best lap so far. Brett Loxton definitely picked up the pace on that last lap as well. He was back into the 35s with a 35.8, just 1/10 ahead of Jake Burton. But Marlon is the man who's really holding these guys up. He hasn't dipped down into the 35s for a number of laps now. And that's why I think Brett is really just trying to find the right moment to get past here. It is really difficult. And as you were saying, very difficult for these top guys to pass. It's just one of those places where the draft is effective, but just not effective enough to really work unless you've got a mistake from your opponent. And I think that's what Brett really has to rely on here. He just has to keep up that pressure, stay really close to Marlon, and let him know that he's constantly there and just waiting for any minor mistake. And then as soon as that happens, he'll be able to pounce on it. But he really needs to press that issue and try and force Marlon into a mistake here. A bit further back though, Steve Jansen running very wide at the hairpin, and subsequently Michael Taliancic is going to have the power down the straight, and Steve might go for a bit of a jink into the inside here and take that position back. He's going to be very brave in the final corner there. Michael, brave enough into the braking zone that he will walk away with that position, and tucked up very closely behind Corey Preston as well. So Corey's actually gotten past Steve as well on that lap. So Steve Jansen losing 2 positions there. And now Corey will maybe be able to help pull this train a little bit further up to Jack Boyd, who's about 6 seconds up the road. And I think we'll probably start seeing the pit activity within the next, I think 6 laps, and someone will be pitting. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was someone like possibly Jake Burton or Jack Boyd or Corey Preston. I think those guys would benefit from coming into the pits a little bit earlier than everyone else. But we'll have to wait and see. As we were saying, around halfway does seem to be the way to go. But given that the track temperature has been dropping a little bit, it might actually be the right strategy to go a little bit longer on these tires. We have seen the undercut work pretty effectively, but as we were saying, the lap times haven't dropped off as dramatically as we have seen in some races. Places like Bathurst, you might see a tire drop off of 1.5 seconds a lap, but at the moment, I mean, we've still got Jake Burton lapping within 0.2 of his best lap time, so there's still definitely some life in these Dunlops to go.
Yes, certainly. So here's Corey Preston side by side with Taliancic. Taliancic trying to get something done here, and of course wisely decides that too wide through that final chicane is no good for either of them. So Preston leads this train still, but it wasn't long ago that Jansen was sort of a cork in the bottle here. It's unleashed a couple of these guys, but any of the cars behind him might also think about an undercut to try and get free.
Absolutely, and we're just seeing a little battle there as well between Sean Thompson and Zach Baker there for 12th and 13th. And Sean was getting very squirrely in the brakes into turn number 1 there, trying to defend from Zach. And Michael not easing off the pressure on Corey Preston here at the head of this train. Still got some pace in that Pursuit Sim Sports car. A little bit of a slide as they come out of turn number 6 there. Very difficult corner to get the power down, a little bit off camber. And especially in these V8 supercars, with the solid rear axle, it's very difficult to get the power down indeed. Now, what is going on at the front of the field? It is compressed quite substantially, and Jake Burton is very much in the slipstream now, and that is really, I think, going to give a bit of a psychological hurry up here to Brett Loxton, and you can see how much ground he picked up in that braking zone. Did Jake Burton. He's right in the mix now, so we thought that this was going to take a lot longer to happen, but he has just absolutely smashed the last couple of laps. In fact, last lap around, not the one he's just done, but the lap before that was his fastest lap, and that lap that he's just done was actually faster than the previous fastest lap that he had set as well. So Jake Burton's really turning up the heat now with the track temperature dropping just a little bit, and he is right in there. So all of our podium positions now, all within 0.6 of a second, and this is something that we've been seeing consistently through this iRacing V8 Supercars official series. All of the leaders pretty much within a second of each other. I can think of at least 4 races in the last 2 months where we've had even the top 4 cars all within a second or a second and a half here. So good to see the lead of this race still very healthy, and I'm sure that these guys are probably now that they're all within such a tight time of each other, I get the feeling that it's either going to explode or they're going to wait and see how the pit strategies sort themselves out here, because there's not too much of a point in these guys really fighting when they're so close to that pit window, and they've got a fairly, it's not a massive gap to Brady Myers back there, but it's enough that they can just cruise comfortably until they really need to start sorting things out. But fighting too much is not going to do them any good. So we just have a look further back in the field. Steve Jansen losing another position this lap to Damian Johnston, and also Guy Leach in the V8 Sleuth Esports car is going to have a bit of a drag race down into the final corner as well. It definitely looks like it is one that he will win. So Guy Leach moving himself up into, I think he'll now be in 10th position, as Michael Taliancic is the first car in the pit lane. So a little earlier than I expected, about 3 laps, but we're just going to have an onboard replay with Michael Taliancic now, thanks to Modem Simulation. It's always been an interesting pit entry here at Montreal, and I think right now is going to be a very good example of that. He's got a little bit of overlap here with Corey Preston, but have a look at this car ahead of him, going for the braking zone early, and he had to brake very early there, get back on the gas, and almost lost it. Just absolutely mashing the brakes as he came into the pits there. So a little bit earlier than I was expecting by 3 laps on the pit window there. So obviously these guys are going to be able to do it on fuel, and now a little bit of pressure from Brett Loxton, but for Brett Loxton, I should say, and a little bit of a push from Jake Burton. And we said that these guys didn't really want to battle. Get the feeling Jake doesn't want to pass here. He just wants to keep Brett on the back of Marlon up ahead, and I'm not sure that Brett's really getting the memo here. He's going for a little bit of a look now, is Jake, but again, pulls back nice and early. No intent of really going for a move. And I'm sure, oh, that's a big hit! That is a big hit for Jake Burton as he comes through the wall of champions. Gets a little bit of red and white paint thanks to the V8 Supercar, Jake Burton there. That was a fairly substantial hit on the rear there. Lucky these cars are built fairly strong, but that Watts linkage with a collision like that can be a bit funny. We'll just see what happened there. He's very close, maybe a little bit late on the turn in, and oh, just ran out a little bit wide there. It's a bit of a strange one for Jake Burton, but kept it all together and pressing on as Zach Baker is being passed there by Brian Borg for position number 11. And it's losing a couple of positions in the last couple of acts. There is Zach Baker. But yeah, I really thought that these guys would not push so much, so that they just let the pit strategy sort themselves out. But now Marlon McMullen's got a little bit of breathing room here. And that might just egg Jake Burton on enough that he's willing to give a move a go here. And you can see how much pace he has in that car. Unfortunately, not good traction on the release of that corner there. But he's definitely got some pace in that car. And I think he probably really wants Brett to go into the pits this lap so that he can try and build that margin up. But it doesn't look like any of these guys are really interested in hitting the pit lane at the moment.
Yeah, and as we saw, hanging the tail out through the final corner again for Jake Burton. But as we saw, if you're tucked up right behind another car, it's difficult for you to make the pit entry at the full speed that's possible. So Burton really would be compromised if he wanted to take the pit entry from behind Brett Loxton. He'd have to be really, really close, go to the inside, and then not brake and swoosh around into the pit lane. I've seen that one done. It's possible. Then if the guy you're racing decides he also wants a pit entry, boy, does it get awkward. Burton looks like, from the body language, like he's really just trying to ramp up the pressure here. It's sideways. It's a bit more out of control. It's just not quite as, run out of the word for this. It's not quite as under control as it looked earlier for him at the start of the race.
Yep, and there's the move down the inside in the chicane, and it's going to be, oh, they're going to run out of room. Oh, that was very close. Pretty sure there was a little bit of a touch there for Jake Burton. He's missing a little bit of his quarter panel there. So fairly clean in terms of time lost. And oh, there's a massive shot from Brett Loxton as they come into the hairpin. A bit of a how do you do. And wow, these guys are fired up this evening. We've got a Modem Simulation replay of that little series of events there. So, I mean, good traction and good drive definitely was there for the move. And I think maybe Brett was not too happy with the amount of room that Jake left him on the exit of the corner there, and decided that he might just get a little bit of it back on the braking zone, and ka-chung. I mean, that looked pretty purposeful there to try and get Jake Burton a little bit out of whack there. I mean, it was hard racing between the two of them. They both came out on the other side, probably a little bit unnecessary, but
They've both gone into
decided
the pit lane.
as
Yes.
I was just about to say. So we'll have to see which one of these guys is going to come off first. I feel like the tires are probably going to be done around the same time as the fuel. They can carry a lot of fuel here this evening, so we'll have to see how they go. And they're about to come off the jacks now, I would think. And still going, still going. No. That seemed like a pretty long stop for both of them, but Brett Loxton's made it out ahead. And the Zuva racing machine. Oh, come on, guys. Here we go. They're going to be pushing each other a little bit here. If I was Brett Loxton, I'd probably just try and cut this next chicane here, but he's managed to just keep ahead enough. And these guys, I'm sure, are going to have a little bit to say each other after tonight's race. And they might have something to say into this next corner here. Oh, gosh. This is starting to become tense now.
You know, it's fun to watch them go at it like this, but at a certain point, you're worried it might end in tears. Before that point, you know, it's all fun and games. You know, a little tap here, you know, a brave move there. But you do not want it to end in disaster for two guys who are effectively trying to fight it out for the win of this race.
Yeah, well, you're exactly right, and it's a tough one. It's a tough situation to be in for both of these guys, and especially for Jake Burton, who gives a little bit of a return serve, fairly fair in retrospect compared to what Loxton dished out earlier. But these guys are going to tally up a couple of these incident points here, so they can't have too much biffo. We're just knocking over the halfway mark of the race right now, and just having a look
in the pit lane right now. So will he come out? Will he retain the lead? If these guys undercut him, I suspect the way they've fought, it's going to be very close.
It's going to be extremely close. And Marlon McMullen, has he got it down into turn number one? He's going to have those two cars just on the inside, but ever so slightly behind. So it's just worked out for Marlon McMullen. And the pit stop times for all of them were very, very close. In fact, Marlon McMullen had the slowest pit stop of them all, but and actually had the slowest lane time of them all. So the undercut not effective enough, and Jake Burton down the inside now into turn number 4. Is he going to be able to get it done? Not quite. And Brett Loxton holding a nice line, but he's going to have, oh, he actually got a really nice run out of that corner as well. So he's going to be able to hold him off for the moment. But these three cars now all podium positions. I mean, they're virtually touching each other. They're that close. They've got about a car in between them now. But all three of these guys between about, oh, what is it, 0.6 of a second between the top three cars. And Brett Loxton getting a little bit too deep into the hairpin, and that's going to force wide Marlon McMullen, and it's going to force Jake Burton into the back of Loxton. And these guys are pretty much going to be sharing a lot of paint for these next couple of laps. It's going to be a very intense fight to the finish here as Brett Loxton fans out to the outside into the chicane, and he's going to stay there. He's going to let Marlon come in, but Marlon's run a little bit deep on the brakes, locks it up and manages to keep it in control. He's going to be under immense pressure into turn number 1 now as he goes to defend the inside line. Brett Loxton might try deep and round the outside. He's not going to have the room to do it though. Cuts back in, looking for a better exit through turn number 2, and a big shunt there, and a big hello from Jake Burton in the rear. Almost pushed Loxton all the way up into and beyond McMullen there. So these guys are absolutely going for it. And look who's in the background there. Is that Brady Myers? Because he has been slowly chipping away, and there he is. He's been catching up to these guys. So all of a sudden, we've gone from being in a 2-car fight for the lead to a 3-car fight. And very shortly, I have no doubt that car of Brady Myers is going to be joining these guys.
especially the way these top three are racing. I mean, McMullen's on the limit. Loxton and Burton have traded paint, on 5-6 occasions. And Myers all by himself, plenty of gap behind him, just able to run his own lines and look after his tyres. Mullen has to defend now, but he's been locking up those tyres. The one lap advantage he had of them being fresher, a lot of that must be gone.
Yeah, you would think the amount of heat that he's been putting into those things cannot be helping him right now. And it's definitely not, because Brett Loxton is virtually pushing him down the straight. And I think he might continue pushing him down the straight. Traffic in the way, getting out of the way nicely there for Christian Smart. He doesn't want to have a bar of this, and rightly so, because these guys are going pretty hard right now. And if you're not in it to win it, you're not going to be in it at all. Christian, very wisely there, getting right out of the way of all four of these guys. So it's just toned down a little bit. The intensity's still there. And again, a big bump from Burton, who's been very good into turn number one. Now he's got the overlap, but it just falls off as they run up the hill with superior traction from the Zuba racing machine. Oh, guys, you can feel it.
And while they battle, Myers has just set the fastest lap of the race.
A 1:35.1, almost dipping into the 34s here. And for context, ladies and gentlemen, that is half a second faster than the lead battle right now. And, Marlon, I mean, he's got a lot of pressure and he's got clear road ahead of him, but he's often getting tied up in these little bumps that are occurring between Burton and Loxton here. He's been bumped into turn one by proxy about 2 or 3 times now, and that's not going to be helping him. But Brady Myers must just be absolutely reveling in this right now, as he basically is just watching all three of these guys turn each other out of shape. And once again, hopefully a 0x is here for these guys, because they're not going to be able to afford too many of these. Gap to the leader now, 1.6 seconds, which means that he's within a second of Jake Burton, which means that he is in the draft and still punching in great times at the moment. We'll see what it is as they come over the line now, but he's definitely clawed in a lot of that margin. Let's have a look. 35.7 for McMullen, 36.0 for Loxton, 36.0 for Burton, and a 35.5 once again. Big lap time there for Brady Myers, half a second on his competitors once again. And I mean, he is in it now. So we now have a 4-car train for the lead. And we have seen that so many times this season, especially we're now 2/3 of the way through this motor race. And to see the top 4 cars all pretty much within a second and a half of each other is absolutely fantastic for this series.
Yeah, I mean, this is amazing to watch. I'm glad that we've closed this up into a 4-car battle. McMullen, can he hold on to it? Loxton and Burton, those two are fighting so hard. And now Myers, the dark horse, joins the battle. Player 4 has entered.
He has indeed. And while we're watching all this excitement, ladies and gentlemen, do not forget to chuck a like onto this video if you do enjoy the hard racing that we are seeing this evening. Also, make sure that you are subscribed to the iRacing Esports Network so you can get all of the latest and greatest racing from the iRacing platform, both from us here at SimSpeed TV and all the other quality broadcasters here on the network, bringing you everything from V8 Supercars to IndyCar and everything in between. And 3 wide, no, it's going to be a slowdown for Brett Loxton, and Jake Burton is going to swoop through and potentially take the lead of this race in a very commanding move down into turn number 1. But there's going to be a bit of a bump there from McMullen into turn number 1 and 2 as well. He's going to try and force his way up the inside, and there's another slowdown. These guys are checking each other up, and slowdown is the word of the night. All 3 of these guys must have one right now. They're 3 wide, almost into turn number 3. Surely this isn't going to end well. Brady Myers getting involved. He's gone from 4th to 2nd in a couple of corners, and McMullen has been unceremoniously dumped to the back of the train. Jake Burton is your new race leader, ladies and gentlemen. Brady Myers from position 4 into 2, and Brett Loxton narrowly got his tippy toes on that 3rd podium spot there, but Marlon's got something to say about it. He wants to get back involved, and Brady, who's had great pace in this car and has not been trading paint, is now right behind our race leader and looking for some action.
It is not over, and there is still 15 laps to go. You can still see a way that Myers could do this, a way that Loxton could do this, and McMullen, well, if he's on the train, who knows what can still happen, what drama and what twists remain. So not out of the picture are any of these guys for the win.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's going to be really dicey for these last few laps here. Still a good portion of this race to go, though. Unbelievably, we still have 15 laps left in this motor race, and the pressure up at the front is absolutely immense. And no, Brady Myers has thrown it all away. All of that hard work that he'd just done has been thrown into the ground, all thanks to the final chicane slowdown, which has punished him quite badly there. So he now is at the back of the train where he was, and we're more or less in the same position we were just a few laps ago, although Jake Burton now has that lead, and it has to be said, he has seemed to have the best pace out of all four of these guys this evening. He was hundreds, or actually thousands of a second pretty much off the pole here, behind the man who now trails him, Brett Loxton, and Brett's looking to struggle a little bit with the rear tires at the moment, and this battle just calming itself down now. A little bit of space built between these guys, and have to see how Brady's able to recover that gap that he's lost. But his cars seem so strong in different areas of the track. They really awkwardly catch each other in quite a few different areas, and it seems like Brady's actually gotten another slowdown. So really pushing is Brady Myers, and very good into the chicane, into the hairpin, sorry, is Brett Loxton. Just not quite able to get it out once again, as he now trails Jake Burton, and Jake already pulling to the inside, trying to shake off as much of the draft as he possibly can, going a bit defensive into the final corner. Does cut across and take the proper racing line though, to think both him and Brett know that they have a bit of an opportunity to make a small breakaway now. They've got just enough of a gap to make something work between the two of them. But these guys have been fighting so hard throughout this race. It's hardly conceivable that they'd be thinking about working together.
Yeah, from some of the little bumps, little serves we saw earlier, to think that they'd, put all that aside now, that both have to be on the same wavelength, thinking about the win and looking at McMullen and Myers in the mirrors. Burton was really good at looking after the tyres, I think, in the first stint. He definitely held on to the pace better, deeper into that stint. If he can do that again, that'll work for him. But he hasn't had the clear air. He's been sliding here, locking up there, having to go deeper on the brakes around there. And I think Myers might have the best tyres of all four of these guys, but he's now 2.5 seconds off the lead because that slowdown was a killer.
It was very poor, and I've just noticed as well that the sun has finally started to make its way through the clouds here in Canada, and it has been showing itself onto the track ever so slightly, which means we are going to get a little bit of increase in track temperature. It has started to climb ever so gently. Having a look now at Brett Loxton and Jake Burton at the front of the field here. It's going to be interesting, as you were talking about before, with the way that these guys have been saving these tires. These guys don't look like they've been saving them all, and Brett's looking really good into that final chicane there. He's looked really good into the hairpin also. So he's got a lot of confidence in that car, despite struggling at times to put the traction down. You can just see how much he's able to really use a lot more of the road here. Jake Burton seems like that car's quite stiff. He's running some very tight lines, but running the car very straight. And quite dissimilarly, Loxton using a lot of the road, using a lot of wide arcing lines, and just progressively getting that power on. Interesting to see both of those lines working quite effectively, but it does have to be said, despite the fact that Jake has looked very fast in this race, Loxton is really he's keeping that pressure up, and he isn't letting Jake Burton get away from him anytime soon. I fear that might happen, but he's doing a good job to keep it in there. And Brady Myers as well has started to start to bring that gap in a little bit to the lead. He's actually brought it down quite significantly, so he's still got some pace in that car as well. already worked himself almost right onto the back of Marlon McMullen here. So suspect that he'll be joining this party once again in a lap or two. But Jake's really running that wider line to try and cut off the slipstream here. We've always seen these guys running funny lines and not wanting to give up the slipstream very much. And just another mind game and another strategy that these guys use to really maximize their race. And McMullen and Loxton getting pretty crazy on the exit of the final chicane there. Almost looked like Marlon was going to get a bit of a tank slapper going there. And a little bit of a bump through turn number 2 for Brett Loxton on to Jake Burton once again. These guys, I'm very surprised the rear and the front of those cars have not traded colors because they really have been riding each other that much through these last couple of laps. And we're just going to get a modem simulation replay of an incident a little bit further back in the field. And that was Dean O'Brien, and I think that's Jack Boyd just behind him in the Gone Rogue Motorsports machine. It's actually, it is Jack Boyd. So Jack being let through very easily there. Maybe a bit of a slowdown there for his opponent, and makes up another position. Been a quiet race for Jack. Started 6th, currently.
Slow down for Loxton.
Oh no, that is tragic. Oh, and Brady Myers might even just get there. He actually had to probably get on the anchors a little more than he wanted to. Maybe Brett's got to clear a little bit more of that because he's given up the track position there on the outside. He's gone for a wider line to try and get the power down the straight, but Brady's now got the inside line for the chicane. And that Zuba racing machine, it's got some ponies on the hood, and Brady's decided to tuck back in. So there are maybe they're going to work together to try and not let this race escape them, because I think McMullen's probably, if anyone's going to... Oh, no! Guys, slow down. It's the word of the night. It always is when we come here to Montreal. And unfortunately for all of these guys, the exception of maybe Jake Burton, who's probably hit less than most, it's really killing the races of a couple of the guys up in this front pack here.
Yeah, suddenly Loxton is now nearly 4 seconds off the lead. Jake Burton's never looked more sure in the lead, and McMullen, he's still there to give Burton something to think about. He's just not as close as Loxton was. Loxton was really giving him some headaches, and we just wonder if McMullen can do the same, or if this is Burton's chance to try and leap out and pull a lead. Brett Loxton has sort of cooked his golden goose there.
Yeah, unfortunately. He's had such good pace in that car, and we've been racing now for 46 minutes, and he's been doing such a good job that whole time. It's very unfortunate to see it all kind of, not so much thrown away, but a lot of that hard work's been undone from one very minor mistake there. So unfortunate to see for Brett Loxton, but does just really go to show how much you need to concentrate throughout these races to maximize your results. And unfortunately for Brett, that is one mistake that I'm sure he will not forget. Definitely had the victory of this race firmly in his sights, and now it is more so in the sights of the two men in the front of the field at the moment. One man on screen at the moment, Marlon McMullen, and Jake Burton in the hot seat right now, who's had some great pace in that car. But Marlon McMullen not letting him get away too quickly at this time. But Brett, at the tail of this field, has got a lot of work to do now to get himself back up. Have to see how long he's got. He's got 9 laps still to get this all done, and just 2.7 seconds to the lead of this race. Definitely not an unattainable figure to work himself towards, but yeah, very unfortunate to see those mistakes from Brett.
Indeed, but McMullen has really got the pressure on Burton more than I thought he'd be able to do. Christian Smart in the lane, and that is for the second time for him. He's now some laps down, but did very, very well when we saw him earlier to stay away from the lead battle, let them race. So a sportsman driver, even if he's not having the race he'd otherwise like to be having.
Yeah, absolutely. But while the battle up at the front has subsided just a little bit, we've been racing for 48 minutes now here at Montreal, and I couldn't think of a better thing to do at the moment than watch a multiple-time V8 Supercar champion chase down the race leader. So we're going to take you for a lap on board with Marlon McMullen in his V8 Supercar here at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve. A great lap there from Marlon McMullen, taking us on board here at Montreal as he attempts to chase down our race leader, Jake Burton. And great to see on board just the amount of attitude control that's required in that car and the different lines that those two drivers are taking. And that is not the ideal line through that chicane for David Kinman. We'll just get a modem simulation replay of what occurred for him there in his Pursuit Sim racing car, and maybe just a little too much gas on the exit of the corner. Very difficult part of the circuit. It's got to be so delicate with the throttle application there, and unfortunately for David, just a little bit too much for him on this given day. Brady Myers starting to fold it in on Marlon McMullen now, and starting to apply a little bit of pressure to the man who was taking us on board just a moment ago. Both of these guys very hungry for victory here, and Brady's been plugging away for a long time to try and get himself into that position, and a big moment under brakes for Marlon McMullen. Saw that car just weaving side to side in the braking zone. He actually managed to keep it all together very nicely there.
Yeah, it looked like a disobedient shopping trolley, still going in the correct direction, but with a 15-degree yaw angle, and somehow he did manage to get it stopped, turned, and he'll hold on to second place.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always good going through the shopping aisles like that, but sure, Marlon McMullen would want to keep that for aisle 6 down at Woolies, and not here coming through the tight-walled areas of Montreal. And Brady Myers still looking for a way now past Marlon. It's not coming easily, though. It has been very difficult to pass here, and without a mistake, it can be very treacherous. We've seen a lot of guys going for moves that have not worked, and I think problematically is that long straight at the end just comes down to such a tight chicane, which is also fairly high speed, and unless you are really working with somebody who you can trust and you're both absolutely committed to making it out the other side, it can be very difficult to have the commitment to go in there. So all these guys have put on quite a few moves tonight. We've seen a lot of them come unstuck, and I'm sure that affects the confidence of these guys when they're going for the moves, but also the pace difference has been so marginal between all these guys. It's very tight racing indeed, and Brady's still looking for a way past Mullen. Not finding anything at the moment. The clouds were starting to creep through before, but that cloud cover's been really heavy throughout this race, track temperature has just returned to pretty much where we started. It's actually still a little bit colder than when we had qualifying around an hour ago. But these cars all still traveling along, and the tires have been holding up fairly well. Have these Dunlop tires been pounding around for the last 20 odd laps for some of these guys. Michael Taliancic, I think lap 15 was the first car that we saw into the pits now. And it looks like Michael Taliancic, just as we were talking about him, actually doesn't look like he is circulating anymore. So something's happened to Michael in the last couple of laps, which is unfortunate. He went for a bit of a bank on an early pit stop and was running within the top 10, so unfortunate for him. But back at the front of this battle now, still looking a bit, still looking very even between all four of our top drivers. Damien Johnston and Guy Leach have been trading lap times for a little while, and Guy Leach has started to catch Damien a little bit. 0.6 of a second last time round he was able to claw in, so a bit of a mistake possibly for Damien, and you can see that car just locking up a little bit as they come through corners 5 and 6. But this battle up the front, so tight between all these guys, they're finding it very difficult to make inroads to each other. But Brett Loxton has now gotten himself within 2 seconds of Jake Burton, so the pace still there. But he's only got 5 laps to start bringing it all together, and he's still got Brady Myers and Marlon McMullen, who have been a handful to get through in these next couple of laps as well.
Yeah, and deeper in the field, these battles continue. We've got Damien Johnson, Guy Leach. That one hasn't resolved itself yet. And behind them, Steve Jansen and Zach Baker. So, well, we've got a delightful battle for the lead that has been entertaining us all the race long. There's other guys out there as well, and they have their own battles. And it's good that they've got sort of the depth to the field, not just the pointy end.
Yeah, it's one of the great things we see about all the races we have here. The iRacing V8 Supercars official series on the Monday nights is it's always a good battle up at the front, but you know, not everyone can be the fastest guy on the day, and always we see throughout the field some absolutely fantastic battles. Some of the most entertaining battles I think we've seen have been, you know, for the 15th, 16th position, and it's always good to see a good array of drivers. Some people who are coming out consistently, other people who we don't see as often but still like to come out from time to time, as Marlon McMullen. Well, he's dropped off significantly from our race leader Jake Burton in just this lap. I wonder if Marlon got a little bit of a slowdown, and that was why Brady was really ramming him coming into the hairpin there, because Brady Myers was very close and a little bit too close to the grass on entry into the chicane. He gathers it back up, and now Brett Loxton's got a nice run out of the final corner as well. It's probably just not close enough to be able to do much with as they come down into turn 1. But Brett Loxton's definitely the car with pace out of all 4 of these guys. He has consistently been the fastest the last couple of laps, though Jake Burton actually spun the last fastest lap of the last time by with a 36.1. Brett has consistently still been in the high 35s while he's been trying to catch this train, and now really applying quite a lot of pressure to Brady Myers in his newly privatized car there, and starting to struggle a little bit with rear grip, it just seems, as he's coming through turns 5 and 6 there, but still maintaining the final position on the podium. And good to see him still performing strongly even without the backing of a team. And unfortunate to see Jackson Suslin-Harlow out of this race so early as well, and Chris Coxhead. Pretty crazy to imagine the kind of battle we would have had up here if those guys had still been in the race. But unfortunately, it's a timeline we'll never get to see, but it has been a great one nonetheless between all 4 of our drivers up the front of the field, and all throughout as well. Zach Baker and Steve Jansen still having a fight back for the final spot inside the top 10. As Zach Baker putting all of his efforts towards gaining that position, and Steve Jansen's under big pressure here. He's going to have to defend into the hairpin. I think he might even have a little bit of a slowdown, maybe. Not quite. Still very committed onto the brakes there, but Zach Baker's going to go for a big undercut there. Go for some very straight traction. He got a good run and is, I think, going to have some overspeed towards the end of the straight here to try and dive down the inside. Of course, Steve can just hug that inside wall if he wants to try and prevent Zach from going through, but he's not going to. He's going to give Zach the opportunity to go down in the inside. They're going to have a little bit of a rub on the entry, and Steve's going to catch the grass massively, but excellent car control from him to keep it all on the tarmac, and for both of them to get through there as well. Not ideal, but definitely a position gain there for Zach Baker. He moves himself up into the final position for the top 10.
Myers have gotten past Brett Loxton. They had a little bit of a rub, and so sorry, that was the order they still were, but they have had a little bit of a rub, and what you can see that's done is it's dropped them a second and a half back from Moe and McMullen. These two battling and Loxton trying to get through has cost them a little bit, and they're now 3 seconds adrift of the lead. Jake Burton leads by 2 seconds. It's the biggest gap almost anyone's had all race.
Yeah, I think it is the biggest gap that anyone's had all race, and that little battling that these guys have been doing has just really opened him up, and more importantly, I think for Jake, it's given him the mental reprieve that he's needed to just get his head down and chuck in some fast lap times to try and pull away from this group. And the lap times are definitely reflecting that Brady Myers and Brett Loxton have had a couple of things to say to each other on that last lap. They were nearly a second slower than the race leader last time by. In fact, Brett Loxton was pretty much bang on a second slower than Jake Burton last time by. So this battle for the final spot on the podium is really causing these guys issues up to the lead, and it looks like now Jake Burton, if he can just hit his apexes for the next lap and a half, it seems like he has a pretty unbeatable gap out the front there. So very strong performance for him, and without a mistake, he should remain at the front of this race. We'll have to see. Steve Jansen, though, still has something to say to Zach Baker about the final spot inside the top 10. Still getting up and in the mirrors of Zach Baker there as they come through turns 3 and 4. Not quite able to get anything done, but still having good pace inside that car. And just have to see if he's able to get anything done before the end of the race, but we are about to start the final lap now, and our race leader Jake Burton getting a little bit crossed up into the final chicane, but making it through rather easily, and he will now start his final rotation around the Montreal circuit here at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve, and definitely a favorite spot for all of our V8 Supercar drivers. I know everyone loves coming to this place, provided they've got a quick setup for the week. And Steve Jansen has managed to get past again on Zach Baker, so nice move there for Steve. We'll get a Modin simulation replay of that for you. And Zach very, looks like he took the normal line into the hairpin, just ran a little bit deep there, actually got massively crossed up and full on sideways across the apex of the corner there, and that did not help him in any respect, and subsequently giving up the position to Steve Jansen for position number 10. Meanwhile, the final spot of the podium is still under question between Brett Loxton and Brady Myers, but it's going to have to be a fairly large lunge, you would think, for Brett to be able to get the move done. He's going to go for a wide entry and hope that he's got some monster speed down the end of the straight here, but it doesn't look like it is going to be. But for Jake Burton, it's been a difficult race. Don't forget, Jake was spun out earlier in this race and sat as low as 5th when he got spun out by Brett at the final corner here, and he has just made absolute work of this field. A great recovery drive from Jake Burton who will take out round number 4 here at Montreal in the iRacing V8 Supercars official series. Brady Myers just comes home ahead of Brett Loxton in the final podium position. Marlon McMullen came home second place, and the boys getting pretty leery after the line. Steve Jansen, though, not able to hold on to position number 10. He got passed by Zach Baker into the hairpin on the final lap. Is Zach going to be able to hold him off? Have both of these guys got enough fuel to get to the end? Steve following Zach across the track, trying to keep that slipstream for as long as possible. Gonna have to get a monster run out of the final corner. It's looking good, but not quite good enough. And Zach Baker will take home position number 10 ahead of Steve Jansen for 11th position there. Good scrap between those two guys as the rest of our competitors on the lead lap come around. David Kinman is the last of our drivers on the final lap, and he is out of fuel. And that uphill long straight to the pit road is going to be very difficult. He's got a little bit left in the tank. He might have swashed it round a little bit, but he is lifting and coasting. He's off the throttle now, clutch in, trying to save himself to the end. He doesn't have anyone he needs to beat. Michael Taliancic is the only car behind him, and he is another 4 or 5 laps off. But gladly for David, he will find just enough juice in the tank, and he will end up across the line in 15th with very little fuel on board. But what a race we had for you this evening. It was filled with lots of drama, lots of contact. I'm surprised half the cars are still the same color that they are when they started, and some fantastic racing and good strategy calls across the board. So fantastic round 4 at Circuit Gilles Villeneuve here for the iRacing V8 Supercars official series was taken home by Jake Burton. And that's very rare that we see the top 3 places in this series covered by privateers. So the privateers out in force this evening with Marlon McMullen and Brady Myers fighting through to get onto the podium for this evening's race. Brett Loxton, well, bit of a trial by fire for him. Unfortunately, one that he passed relatively successfully, but not as well as I'm sure he would have liked, coming home in 4th after starting from pole. Jack Boyd, quiet race for him. Didn't see a lot of Jack, but he came home inside the top 5. A good result for him. Dean O'Brien continued to plug away and come home in 6th position for One Performance Racing. Brian Borg, good race from him. Up into 7th for Premier Esports Racing Team. Damien Johnston for Gone Rogue Motorsports came home in 8th as well. As Guy Leach for the V8 Sleuth Motorsports team, or esports team, and Zach Baker came home in position number 10.
Steve Jansen couldn't hold on in that one, and he ends up with 11th place. 12th goes to Mihail Latishoff. 13th is Sean Thompson. 14th, Bruce Keeley. 15th, David Kinman, and the last car on the lead lap. Then we're effectively into retirements here with 16th place, Michael Taliancic, 17th place, Christian Smart, 18th place, Corey Preston, 19th, Harley Haber, 20th, Jackson Suzlin Harlow, and then into our pretty well first lap retirements, Kyle Stokes, Chris Coxhead, Scott O'Keefe, what could have been for some of those guys.
Yeah, absolutely. And Harley Haber also would have been nice to see him and Jackson and Kyle and Chris all up towards the pointy end of the field. But unfortunately, that's something we might have to see for another day. But it has been an absolute pleasure shouting at race cars for you this evening on the iRacing Esports Network, proudly presented by myself this evening and David Haynes. Thank you to David for joining me up in the commentary booth, and Jay Kennedy, as always, for pressing the buttons and giving us the beautiful pictures and covering all of the great racing that we have seen this evening. We look forward to coming back same time next week for round number 5 of the iRacing V8 Supercars official series, but there is plenty more on the iRacing Esports Network and Sensei TV throughout the rest of the week. So make sure that you do tune in to catch more fantastic esports racing action. But from me, Zach Hanlon here in the commentary booth, it's been an absolute pleasure commentating for you tonight. We look forward to you joining us next time. And until then, be well.
This is fantastic. This is GT racing right now.
He's got traction. He's got everything outside of both of them. Maloney.
Oh, he's taking Anderson. Anderson's up top.
Oh my God. Oh, big crash. Oh my goodness. Half the field's going to get rolled.
Second very close. These guys are want to make their way through the field very quickly.
Oh, there we go. Oh no.
That's massive! This is it! This is over! I can't believe this! Oh my god!
God, what?